across the country, Joya Massa and Trent Smith.
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to our second episode of NASA STEM Stars, where students all across the country can engage and interact with scientists and innovators from NASA and ask any question you like. And we are here today with our Veggie team from the Kennedy Space Center. My name is Jen Hudgens, an education specialist, and I'm here to guide you through today's journey with our scientists from the Veggie project. I want to let you know that we are going to meet the team today, and we're going to learn about the mission that they're working on, and then you'll have a chance to ask your questions to our team. And I'm going to actually assign you a mission where you can share with us on social media at hashtag NASA NextGenSTEM. So if you have any questions while today's session is going on, we have a chat window open for you there on YouTube, and just type in your question in the chat box, and I'll be sure to ask our scientists your questions, and you'll be able to hear and interact with them. So let me introduce you to our team. We have a project at the Kennedy Space Center. It's called Plants in Space, and it's actually an acronym, Veggie, which I'm sure you're familiar with that word, shortened for vegetable, but it's actually an acronym. We have Joya Massa. She's a plant scientist with us at the Kennedy Space Center. And Trent Smith is the project manager for the Veggie project. So I'm going to turn it over to them and let them introduce you to themselves, tell you a bit about their backgrounds, how they got to NASA, their education, and what their project is all about. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Joya. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm glad to talk with you about my journey. Can't see, is the slide up? There we go. Yeah, so we're going to talk with you about our research on plants in space, and this is part of our space crop production group at Kennedy Space Center. So if we go to the next slide. So my background is that I got an undergraduate degree in plant science from Cornell University and a PhD in plant biology with a minor in geosciences from Penn State. And I'm a life sciences project scientist at Kennedy Space Center. Some of my hobbies include reading, walking, and being in nature, gardening, taking care of plants. So if we go to the next slide, it kind of highlights my journey. So I was born in South Florida and was fortunate enough to grow up about an hour or so from where we're at on the Space Coast in Central Florida in DeLand. And I was in the FFA organization when I was in junior high school and high school, which is where I learned about the research for plants in space and where I really fell in love with this area. That was when I decided that this is what I wanted to do with my life. So from there, I went to Cornell University, studied plant science all the way up in Ithaca, New York. And I had a really exciting opportunity to do a semester abroad over at the University of Tasmania in Australia. So that was that detour, where I also got to study some really cool plants. Then I went to Penn State University for my PhD. And from there, I went to Purdue University, where I did what's called postdoctoral research, where I was actually part of a NASA center that was studying plants for human life support. My PhD was more fundamental, where I looked at how plants sense and respond to gravity. So I was able to get both ends of the spectrum. And from there, I came to Kennedy Space Center, and I was a postdoctoral researcher here before I was fortunate enough to be hired by NASA to do what I've always wanted to do. So now over to that.
What kind of books do you like to read? You said you like to read. What do you like to read?
I read a lot of fiction. I'll read everything from science fiction and fantasy, which actually my husband teaches at a local university, to mystery novels, spy novels, biographies, histories as well. So yeah, I really love to read all different things.
That's cool. In Tasmania, Australia, right? So I
Yeah,
know the Tasmania devil, right? Everybody's heard about those. Are there any
right.
other animals that fascinated you while you were down there besides the plants?
Well, there were wombats, wallabies and kangaroos and platypuses. So, it's hard to get any weirder or cooler than that. Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks for coming today, Joya. We really enjoy having you. All
Thank
right,
you.
Trent, why don't you tell us about a little bit about your journey and background?
Yeah. So Joy is like a really good, story about, this is what I want to do, and she never gave up. And where I'm more of a, just being lucky and doing, things that I love. So um, I went to school. Actually, I don't know if the slide's up, but I went to a lot of schools. And I went to a lot of schools, but I finally ended up in Florida, and I got a chemistry degree at Florida Institute of Technology. I was fortunate enough to get into the NASA. It was the co-op program. It's now Pathways. As a graduate student, I got a master's degree in chemistry when I was there, and I was working at NASA at the time as a co-op or a Pathways intern. And so I was able to do research at university and research at NASA and combine it together for a thesis. But I started at Houston Community College. I went to University of Houston. I moved to California. I worked and surfed and played hockey. And in my 20s, it's a great time to be in Southern California, doing those things. But I went back to school. I went to Rio Hondo, Loyola Marymount, and then I had those two. I had Florida Tech and Loyola Marymount compete for financial aid because I needed money, and I needed help with school. And so, Florida Tech gave me a little better package, and I packed up my fiance and my dog and my cats and trucked across the country and did it. So, and then I got to NASA, and I got to make new materials and break them and zap them with electricity and then make them better. I mean, what a cool job, right? It's like being 8. And, you're building stuff and breaking it. And then I had so many, so much fun, and I got tapped on the shoulder, and I had an opportunity to go learn something new. And I think it's because I'm always looking to learn. I really like being part of a team, and part of being a team is listening and doing what needs to be done. And I got a chance to go work on Ares 1X and the VAB. This was the test rocket. And so I was on the floor of the VAB, and we're building this test rocket through the whole year. And I'm a chemist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a process engineer. I'm not an ops person. I'm a chemist. But I sat there, I listened, and I figured out what the job was, and I did it. And I had just multiple opportunities after this. I mean, I went up to the Capitol Hill, and I was a technical advisor to the Senate. I know nothing on space policy, but I can learn, and I know technical things, and I knew NASA, so that was what was helpful. And I came back, and I was the commercial crew strategic communications manager, a chemist. So I guess my point is really with work ethic, with love of learning and being curious, and having integrity, you can go do any job. And and after that, I got to come over to the ISS, Life Sciences Research Group, and be part of Veggie. And what a tremendous opportunity. I mean, we're growing space plants, right? When we grow plants on the moon and all the way to Mars, it all comes back to what we're doing now and what we did before. So, really to be a part of this journey when we're going to grow plants on different bodies is what a humbling and tremendously, I don't know. I don't even know. I'm speechless at this point. What a cool job, I'll just say.
So Trent, you started out in California, the furthest away you could be from the Kennedy Space Center, right? So did you ever think you were going to work for NASA, or was that a goal of yours when you were younger, like in high school?
I didn't have any goals. I just knew I liked technical things. When I was at Loyola Marymount, I was part of the research experience for undergraduates, and that's run by the National Institute of Science, I think. I can't remember. I think it is. At any rate, it was really shaped me because at that time I realized I thought we knew a lot of the answers, but then I realized what research is. You're going to go design an experiment. You're going to go learn something about something that no one knows anything about. And for that time period, you're going to know something that no one else does until you publish what you learned. And for me, that was a light bulb moment where that's how we advance scientific knowledge and engineering knowledge. And I wanted to be a part of that. And so after that, I was sold. So I went and got a technical degree. NASA was never on the radar. It was I was lucky, So there's an old saying that sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Maybe I'm evidence of that. But, Joy has been this persistent. I want to do this since 12, and she's doing it. Me, I'm kind of the opposite, where I'm a non-traditional student, but having a good attitude, loving to learn, doing a good job, showing up and getting it done, and whatever needs to be done, and working for the team. I think that's really an important thing that I think a lot of students can hold on to, even if they're not the greatest student to start with.
Well, I think both of your backgrounds are very encouraging to students, because I know both of you well, and I know that you're both hard workers, and I think that's the platform or the basement that you both started from. So we encourage students to be hard workers, and you can do whatever you want to accomplish, right? So Joya, do you want to share with us a little bit about your project, Veggie, and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, I'll start and then Trent will take over. So if we want to go to the first slide, we'll start talking about why we want to grow plants in space. First of all, it's really for the food. If you look at that photo, that's astronaut Mike Hopkins, who's going to be going back to the space station soon. And that's a Thanksgiving dinner on space station. So that's a pretty fancy meal. And you can see all the foods individually packaged. A lot of it's either freeze-dried or thermostabilized in some way. And the astronauts will generally add water. They can add cold water or warm water, and they can put things in a food warmer. But that's pretty much it. That's the standard for food. And so the addition of fresh vegetables, fresh produce to that diet can be really beneficial from, a morale standpoint, and that goes to the next point, the psychological well-being, but it can also be really important for nutrition and for variety and flavor. And as we go farther and stay longer, the food, that packaged food, the quality and the vitamins, the nutritional quality can degrade. So we're looking at growing plants to supplement that packaged diet to make sure that the astronauts stay healthy. And the psychological well-being is really important as well. When you're living far away from Earth in this stressful environment where you can't go outside without a spacesuit, it might be really, really important to have that little piece of Earth to connect you. You can see the plants here behind me. A lot of us have house plants. We have yards, we have gardens. And when you're in space, you may not have any green growing things. So having those green growing things, I think, would be really, really beneficial. And so we're trying to collect data on that right now. And then at the same time that plants are producing food, they're also recycling the atmosphere, revitalizing that atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis. They take up the carbon dioxide we breathe out, and they emit oxygen that we can breathe in. And they're taking up water, and they give off pure water vapor through their leaves. And that could be recondensed and used for life support. So there's a lot of benefits for growing plants. So if we go to the next slide, that is kind of a depiction of what an artist thought a lunar base might look like someday, and here you can see densely packed layers of plants kind of in the bottom left under that dome. They're growing under electric lights, and they're growing in layers, and they're inside the habitat in the protected structure where the astronauts are living and working and exercising. So this is probably how plants might someday be grown on a moon base. If we go to the next one, that's more of a nearer term Mars rendition. So this is a module that could be launched on a rocket that could contain a greenhouse that's hooked to the rest of the module, the rest of the habitat. And this might be a way to provide food for the crew. So some of the work that we do on at Kennedy Space Center is about working to figure out how to grow crops for the crews in space right now. But a lot of the work we're doing is figuring out how to grow crops for the future, and how will we do that for a moon base or a Mars base, and what do we need to have in those different scenarios. So I think next we're going to have Trent talk about the International Space Station.
Right. So I really love this picture of the space station. It really, I don't think it does the station much justice, though, because it's hard to get scale. So that space station that you see just whipping around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour, and it weighs just under 1 million pounds, is the size of a football field, including the end zones. And inside is a home and laboratory for the crews that live there. And inside that, we have a couple Veggie units. So we can go to the next slide. There. Okay, so there's one of the Veggie units when it was first installed back in 2014. And if you look on the station, you look around, you see all these cables and wires and metal and plastic, just like you have at home, I'm sure. But in that kind of tangle of wires is the garden. And so Joy mentioned behavioral health and morale, right? So this is the plants that people can smell and they can see. And so that is their touchstone for home. I mean, even though they're going around the planet, they're close to the planet, they can see the green and the beautiful blues. They can't really experience it. So that little garden can, for the crews, become pretty important from a morale standpoint. And even better, if you're growing crops, it's food that they can eat that's fresh. So next slide. There we go. You want to talk a little bit about the crops we select, Joy?
Sure. One of the big things that we do at Kennedy Space Center is crop selection research, trying to identify what will grow well in the different environments. And so for the very first sets of our Veggie tests, and we'll show you a little bit of how those went, we selected red romaine lettuce and this profusion zinnia flowers. The crops were reliable, they grew rapidly, they're pretty small, we need to grow small crops, and they're pretty attractive. And the lettuce was the one that was going to be eaten. So we selected that one because it had low natural microbial levels on the leaves. It's pretty palatable. Most people don't hate lettuce. It may not be your favorite thing to eat, but it's pretty good, pretty acceptable. And because it's a red lettuce, it may have higher levels of antioxidants, which could be health beneficial for the crew. So if we go to the next slide, I think that's a video showing the harvest of the red romaine lettuce. So if we could play that video, Joshua, that'd be great. So here you can see astronaut Kjell Lindgren harvesting the lettuce from Veggie. This was really exciting. So we had tried lettuce once before and it had grown pretty well, but we didn't let the crew eat that set. But this set, we let them grow and eat. So here's Kjell. He cut some of the lettuce. We still had them bring half the crop back so that we could do analysis of it. So they had to package that and freeze it. You can see he doesn't even quite remember at this point. You can't put things down and expect them to stay there. He'd only been on the space station for a week or two by the time the lettuce was harvested, but he really enjoyed it. And he figured it out very quickly. It's challenging. You got to juggle everything. But we have the other astronauts filming and watching. And then we have Kimia Yue, Scott Kelly, and Kjell doing the lettuce toast when they finally got to eat the lettuce. And that was really exciting for all of us. They said it was good. It was fresh, and they really enjoyed having that. They had some cheeseburgers. They saved some for the cosmonauts who were working outside, cleaning the windows on the space station. And they all enjoyed it later that night as well. So the next thing we grew, I think we'll have Trent talk about some zinnias.
Yeah, there we go. So so the zinnias were a longer term crop. So the red romaine lettuce was about 30 days. And, the zinnias are a flower and they take longer to flower. And if you ever want to grow fruit in space, right, we got to have a flower. It's got to then produce the fruit. So we wanted to see hey, can you get a flower to grow? And we did. We had lots of troubles with the flowers, though. I don't want to tell you it's easy. It was not easy. Lots of really, really, really nail-biting moments, lots of angst, but Scott Kelly took over, and he took great care of the flowers, and actually took such good care of the flowers, you can see he unbuckled his flower and took it all around space station one day. You can see he took it, and one of the shots up on the top, he took the flower out to the cupola, and I think in a tweet he said to go get natural light, right? And then, you know, that's the Russian dining table there, and they had a centerpiece that day. And then to Joy's point about the morale and behavioral health, that photo of Scott Kelly and Misha there, the sign that they're holding, it says 300 days in space. And they took a photo, I think 100 days, 200 days, and this was their last photo, 300 days of space. And it's really not easy to see, but Scott Kelly is holding his little buddy, his flower. And so to me, that says a lot about the power of the plants and with the crews. And these flowers were approved Profusion Zinnia. And once they flowered, they continued to flower. And you can go to the next slide. You can see they just kept flowering. And over, 2 weeks, I think they just kept kicking out flowers. And until on Valentine's Day, which was a Sunday in 2016, Scott Kelly produced the first off-planet Valentine's bouquet using a little binder clip and some duct tape. I think there it is. Yeah, he took it out to the cupola and got a shot of this Valentine's bouquet. And I think, what do we got up next? Next slide. I think, Joya, you're going to talk about, the Mizuna. That's definitely your experiment.
Yeah, so since we've grown the zinnias, we've grown a number of other leafy greens on space station. And most recently, we did Mizuna mustard. This was Veggie 4. And this was a real interesting study. We actually used both Veggie chambers. One had more reddish purple light and the other had more bluish purple light. And we were comparing to see if the nutrition inside the plants differed under those different wavelengths of light on space station, if the flavor differed. So we actually had the astronauts doing taste tests, which was super exciting, and if the plant yield differed. And then we also had the astronauts looking at behavioral health aspects of how do the plants really make them feel. So we're collecting data on all this, and this is really going to help inform our future growing systems. So I think with that, we'll wrap up and we can take some questions.
That was so interesting. We've got actually a lot of questions too. There are a couple actually about our plans to grow plants on Mars. So have you worked with any teams at the Kennedy Space Center on ideas or concepts for that?
Yeah, Joey, why don't you take that? Well, I could talk a little bit about it. I was going to kick it to you. So we are definitely looking at that. There's no question. Joy is one of the team members. And, essentially what we're looking at is plants that can produce vitamin C, vitamin K, and vitamin B1. And so a lot of the focus, we talk about the lettuces, but the recent plants that we've grown are red Russian kale, extra dwarf pak choi, which actually was first identified and tested by student citizen scientists as part of the Fairchild Challenge in South Florida. So these are high in vitamin C and vitamin K. I think next year we're going to test legumes, and legumes are really pretty good candidates for B1. And so we're trying to get a nice stable of crops that we know, at least we can test and see how they grow in microgravity and see how they do in these confined environments with these kind of strange grow boxes with LEDs. And we think we're going to have high CO2 probably on Mars, right? Or certainly the vehicle on the way to Mars, just like we do on station. And so how will these plants do with this? And so we're doing a lot of ground testing. And then once you kind of get good candidates from your ground test, then you can go fly and see how it performs on ISS. And really, we are at the very beginning stages of that kind of those experiments and getting that data. Joya, what did I miss?
Well, I guess I should just add that, we talk a lot about plants that you can grow and pick and eat fresh. And the reason for that is we don't really have any way on the space station to cook anything. We have that little food warmer, but it's not an oven, it's not a microwave. When we go to Mars on the way there, we're probably going to be pretty similar. It'll be very space and mass constrained. But when we're on the surface of Mars or on the surface of the moon, we may have more ability to have food processing and preparation equipment. So then we can start to grow some other types of crops. So, for now we're looking at things that you can pick and eat fresh, but maybe in the future, if we have a microwave or an oven, it will be pretty straightforward to grow potatoes and sweet potatoes and cook them. And then, eventually we can add more components of the diet. So we can do soybeans or wheat if we have, milling machines and bread machines and tofu presses. And, we can get to that point. It can all be automated or robotic. We'll probably have to have a lot more robotics and automation because this is a lot of work for the crew to take care of that many plants. But we see this as a building process to build to this larger production system in the future to help sustain humans as we go farther away.
So there was a question too about the growth media in the plants that you use. So are astronauts going to be expected to bring bags of soil with them to Mars? And how are the plants going to get their sunlight, or how do the plants on the ISS get their light? That was a question as well.
Well, why don't I take the one about the ISS, and Joy, you can talk a little bit about the kind of water delivery and designs. So on space station, the plants get their lights from LEDs, so that's light emitting diodes. And the space station has the solar panels, and so they're able to get a pretty good amount of electricity. Think about 80,000 watts of electricity, and so we use a little bit of that. The Veggie unit with the fans and the lights and everything runs on about 70 watts. So it's pretty efficient, and now there's new LEDs to give you even more wavelength capabilities that are really efficient. So I think in the future, you're probably going to rely on electric light. There's other technologies. You can use fiber optics to maybe pipe light in, and there's, all kinds of things that folks are looking at. But I think for the most part, right now, if I was to go, I'd say LED lights. And Joy, did you want to talk a little bit about, the arsalite and, plans to kind of phase out the arsalite?
Yeah, exactly. So, when we're growing in Veggie, we're growing in these plant pillows, which are essentially kind of a space grow bag, as Trent likes to call it. And it's filled with a baked ceramic, so this calcined clay that's inside there, mixed with a controlled release fertilizer. But that's really a first step to being able to grow things well. And so we have been using that to see how well it'll work, but it's not reusable, it's not sustainable. So we're looking at more sustainable plant growth approaches, and we have a number of groups investigating water and nutrient delivery in microgravity. If you have a little bit of gravity, like on the moon or Mars, that makes things a lot easier. But without gravity, water and oxygen don't mix well, and plant roots need water and oxygen. So that's a real tricky thing. But we think that we can develop space hydroponic systems that will grow the plants more efficiently. And what we have to start thinking about when we're going to these longer destinations is recycling and reuse. So how do we take the inedible plant material, like your stems and leaves of your tomato plant, and pull the nutrients out of that and put them into the next set of tomatoes? How do we reuse those nutrients? So, we just had Earth Day last week, and it, reminds everybody that you've got to be much more sustainable to have these types of systems that will be able to grow plants for the future. So we've got to be able to reuse and recycle, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, in Veggie right now, we're just learning how to grow and eat plants. I mean, at the most basic level. And so from there, we're going to build. And that's what Joy talked about.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. So real quick answer to this question. We have some students wondering if they wanted to be an engineer and do what you're doing, what is their best path or best class to take when they get to college?
I think the thing that ties all the sciences together is math. It really does. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to be an engineer, if you're going to be a scientist, you got to know some of the basics on math. And so And for me, math was not my favorite subject. I did okay with it. Physics was my favorite, but I think math ties it all together. But really, you just want to go do what you're interested in. And physics spoke to me. I was like, oh my God, we can describe the world with math. Math has a purpose, and so that clicked for me. So find that thing that clicks for you, and I think you'll do fine. What do you think, Joy?
I would just agree with that. We have teams of all different people that are working on this. We have scientists, we have engineers, we have chemists, botanists, agriculturalists, we have mechanical and electrical engineers, systems engineers, agriculture engineers, and then a lot of other people that are all really, really intrinsically involved in this. So whatever you find that you love, you'll probably do the best at. And if you're good, that will give you the best chance of getting where you want to go.
Perfect. Thank you, too, for being with us today. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Yeah. So we got a challenge for the students. I want you to go and watch a previous webinar that Joya and Trent did with us on, you'll see the link in the chat window. It's about growing plants in space, and there's a specific mission at the end of that webinar about growing popcorn at home. And Trent says you might get a little mold on there, but it's okay because he did too. But I encourage you to go and try to grow some popcorn at home, and then share your results with us at #NASA NextGenStem. And we will see you next time, everyone. Thanks again for joining in.